The PlayStation 5 DualSense Edge is Sony's first attempt at a peripheral aimed at the professional gamer. It integrates features found on other high-end devices and introduces some truly innovative new ones. But at $200, is it worth the first-party upcharge compared to formidable third-party competition? And how does it compare to the long-standing Elite series from Xbox? Let's find out. Before we dive into the new contender, it's important to establish some context, as Sony's a relative latecomer to this segment. In this video, I'll cover the industry as a whole, review the DualSense Edge, and showcase a couple alternatives. Full disclosure, most of the products I'm looking at today I was sent for review. If by the end of this video you decide to buy something, please use my affiliate links to do so. With that out of the way, let's jump right in. The original Xbox Elite controller made a splash when it released way back in 2015. It was actually the first product I ever reviewed on this channel, or at least one of the first. Previous to this, Pro controllers were relegated to third-party manufacturers such as Scuf. The Xbox Elite Series 2 built on the success of the original by adding some new features, an improved case, and overall enhancements to comfort, quality, and longevity. It also finally got a rechargeable internal battery and Bluetooth. They've even added a Core Edition to the lineup for a lower $130 price. Despite early issues with durability, the Elite series has been relatively well received by the Xbox and PC communities. As welcome as these features are, for many gamers it's still not enough to justify the added cost. Thankfully, there are devices out there that offer the same, if not greater functionality at a dramatically reduced price. The first device we'll be looking at is the big one, Armor X Pro. The Armor X Pro is an attachment for Xbox Series controllers that adds Elite-like functionality in addition to a few features not included on the Elite controllers. The standard version sells for $50 and adds remappable buttons, turbo, macros, profiles, and a customizable mobile app. The Pro version, like we have here, comes in at $70 and has all the same features but adds a 6-axis gyroscope. Inside the box is the control module, a USB-C charging cable, and a USB compatibility dongle. The device is installed by simply removing the existing battery cover and batteries, snapping in the attachment, and plugging in the USB-C cable. I'm actually giving this one away, so follow the link in the description to find out how to possibly win it. Both versions include a dongle used to interface with the Xbox Series, Xbox One, PS4, Nintendo Switch, and PC. It is compatible with PS5, but since the console doesn't see it as a PS5 controller, it doesn't allow you to use it with PS5 games. While unfortunate, that's more of a critique of Sony's business practices than a shortcoming of the accessory. The product tagline is beyond the Elite. This could just be a catchy phrase, but I think it's a less than subtle dig at the aforementioned peripheral. This is an attachment device that clips to the back of an existing Xbox Series controller, but it's less ugly and intrusive than most other attachment devices I've seen. It comes in both black and white to match a greater selection of controllers. The ergonomics of the Armor X Pro are actually pretty great. It's lightweight and I mostly forget it's even there. I have average-sized hands, and it places the mappable buttons exactly where my middle fingers naturally want to rest. Most controllers with 4 rear buttons dedicate an input to the ring and middle fingers. This way, each finger is responsible for only one button. The button placement of the Armor X Pro makes the middle fingers do all the work. However, this didn't end up being as much of a problem as I thought it would be. I simply roll my fingers down to actuate M1 and M2, and roll them up to actuate M3 and M4. The buttons registered this input with a very satisfying click. In addition to the 4 mappable buttons, there are 6 other buttons used to control the various settings. The power button is used to turn on both the attachment and controller simultaneously. A turbo button can be used to trigger an actuation up to 20 times per second. Macros can also be recorded to create precise and repeatable sequences. Pressing the center button activates that 6-axis gyro, and it was surprisingly precise and responsive. Natively, no Xbox controllers have ever used a gyroscope, so you might expect support for such a feature to be limited. However, I'm pleased to report that the integrated gyro can be mapped to other analog inputs of the controller for things like gyro aiming. I explored this feature in the Valve Steam Deck, but it essentially augments aiming with traditional thumbsticks for greater precision. In this capacity, it worked great in every game I tried it, on both Xbox and PC. While I don't personally use this feature, it does work as advertised, and those that do use gyro aiming will be pleased with its performance. The rechargeable 1300 mAh battery is rated for 10 hours of use, and in my experience, this was actually a bit conservative. Battery life can be further improved by adjusting the rumble intensity or even disabling it entirely using the function button. While all of these settings can be configured on the controller itself, using the accompanying mobile app with a visual interface makes this much easier. Macros can be set up on the controller with a simple recording, but the app allows the user to customize the action sequence and provide precise timing intervals. Configs can be customized to make personalized adjustments to the gyro behavior, stick precision and dead zones, trigger sensitivity, and button mapping. It also adds additional functionality like virtual hair triggers. It's a similar experience to the Xbox Accessories app for PC and Xbox. I've seen conflicting reports of the app needing to be downloaded directly from the manufacturer's website, but I was able to get it from the Google Play Store without issue. The only real shortcoming of the device is its support for 3.5mm headsets. Plugging in a headset to the base of the Xbox controller only works for wired connections. When the PS5 and Xbox Series released, I compared the two console families at length. The two brands share much of the same internal hardware, but the PS5's DualSense controllers are a place where I felt PlayStation had a significant advantage. While they are impressively engineered devices, they lack the functionality other premium controllers offer. The new DualSense Edge aims to resolve this by becoming the first Pro controller made directly by Sony. It released on January 26th and retails for $200. Included with that lofty asking price is a carrying case, braided USB-C cable, a locking USB connector housing, 2 standard thumbsticks that come installed on the controller, 2 high dome sticks, 2 low dome sticks, 2 rear paddle buttons, 2 rear half dome buttons, and of course, the DualSense Edge itself. All of this equipment fits comfortably in the included carrying case. The hard white clamshell exterior contrasts the black cloth and rubber interior. It has a USB-C pass-through like the Elite controller case, but it's just a Velcro door with a hole to access the charging port of the controller. This Velcro door, by the way, is ridiculously hard to open, and half the time it immediately flips itself shut. It's large enough to support the new locking USB-C connector housing, but I still don't really get the purpose of this. I understand it prevents the USB connector from coming loose if someone trips on it. If the cable is locked to the controller, wouldn't the controller get ripped out of my hands? Is that really better? Plugging and unplugging the controller in the case is not the most elegant process either. Not to mention, when unplugged, the cable will just slide out and fall behind your desk. Conversely, Microsoft uses a weighted, removable charging stand with charging pins so the controller can magnetize to the stand without having to fiddle with the cable at all. Setting up the DualSense Edge was a straightforward process. When the new controller is detected for the first time, the PS5 guides the user through a tour of the device and its associated settings. First, it introduces the newest hardware features, followed by its associated software enhancements. Once acquainted with the new features, the console will prompt the user to set up their first profile. While these profiles can be set up in any way the user desires, an intuitive way is to delineate by game genre, such as FPS, racing, or RPG. Once a profile is made, the tour will show the user how to customize button assignments. By default, the rear buttons have no assigned input, and one will need to be provided. Next, the stick input sensitivity and dead zone adjustment can be configured. This changes how the sticks behave and is again largely dependent on the type of game being played. When both sticks are configured as desired, the tour continues to the trigger customization. Here the player can define what range of travel distance the controller should detect. If using a trigger stop, the controller communicates its new trigger stop location to the console, and the dead zone recalibrates to compensate for the shortened distance. Finally, the user has the option to customize the vibration and adaptive trigger intensity. By default, both of these options are set to the strongest sensation, but this can be reduced or disabled entirely to help preserve battery life. All of these customizations don't take effect until assigned assigned a profile on the controller and then applied by using the associated shortcut. There is always one default profile assigned to the triangle shortcut, and 3 more profiles can be created and applied to the circle, cross, and square shortcuts. Any other profiles not mapped to a shortcut live in the unassigned profiles section. Switching profiles is one of the 2 options accessible by the new function buttons found under the thumbsticks. Pressing the button pulls up the function menu, and then pressing a face button switches to the associated profile. The same is true for the directional arrows, but this controls volume and game chat level. Although there are 2 function buttons, they both do the same thing and don't have a separate function menu or anything like that. They're designed this way so that one can be pressed while the opposing thumb presses the desired button on the opposite side of the controller. It's a clever design that has a lot of potential, but I was disappointed to find these are the only 2 things that the function buttons are used for. Access to additional settings or even an extra layer of button mapping would have been obvious inclusions. I also don't think these buttons are up to the same level of quality as other inputs on the gamepad, as there's a lot of undesirable movement going on. The controller design is similar to the existing DualSense with a few visual tweaks to differentiate itself. There have been minor changes to the faceplate portion surrounding the thumbsticks. Not only is it glossy black instead of matte, but it's narrower, and now only a portion of it is removable. The face buttons and directional arrows have likewise received the all-black treatment, but most notably the trackpad is now black and textured with PlayStation's signature symbols pattern. This texture also extends to the triggers and underside of the controller as well. In the hand, it doesn't feel much different than a standard controller. The first thing I noticed is that it's slightly heavier and the materials feel more premium. I already mentioned the texture, but the inner grip is actually made of a completely different material. Instead of plastic, it feels like a hard rubber. Although it is grippier, the softer composition makes me concerned about stains and discoloration over time. Speaking of longevity, controller thumbsticks have become a sore spot for console manufacturers in recent years. It seems every month there's a headline about a new stick drift lawsuit being filed against Sony, Microsoft, or Nintendo. There have been developments with electromagnetic stick technology that supposedly prevent stick drift and dead zones entirely, but thus far, none of the big 3 have tried to leverage an alternative technology like this, instead sticking to traditional potentiometer modules. Stick drift on an Xbox or PlayStation controller can especially be a big deal, as in both cases, a replacement module requires desoldering the old part and soldering in a new one. Sony is taking a profound new approach to this issue by making the thumbsticks user accessible and selling replacement modules for just $20. Removing the faceplate and swapping out the thumbsticks can be done in less than 30 seconds. Superficially, this seems like a very pro-consumer move. Instead of throwing away a $200 piece of technology for a drifty stick, simply swap out a module for literally 1/10 the price. On one hand, I'm on board with making the thumbsticks easier to replace. On the other hand, I don't like the attitude Sony is adopting, where thumbsticks are seen as entirely disposable and replacing them should be a regular occurrence. I understand moving parts will eventually wear out and need to be replaced eventually, but the fact that they include a cavity for a spare thumbstick module in the carrying case sends a very concerning message. The thumbsticks themselves feel great, and I've always liked the feel of the DualSense's stick material more than any other console. It comes with a pair of standard height concave sticks identical to other DualSense controllers, but standard and tall dome sticks are also available for a more legacy PlayStation experience. These can also be mixed and matched to achieve the desired combination of comfort and precision. The only thing I don't like about these sticks is the fact that the stem and base material is still plastic. They also snap into place with a feel and sound that gives the impression that something is about to break. In a vacuum, this may not even be worth mentioning, but we live in a world where the magnetized metal sticks of the Xbox Elite controller exist. Just do that. Like all other Pro controllers, the DualSense Edge has buttons on the underside to keep your previously idle digits busy. Paddles are usually the interface of choice, but alongside a set of paddles are a pair of half domes. This design might be more comfortable depending on hand size and controller grip, and after using them a bit, I definitely understand the appeal. However, the Edge only has 2 of these rear buttons, when just about all of its competitors have 4. These can be mapped to any other digital input, but they're most often used as a replacement for face buttons. By moving these 4 buttons to the back, the right thumb never has to leave the right thumbstick. In first-person shooters specifically, this can make a life or death difference. Maybe for some this isn't a big deal, but from the perspective of someone who's been using 4 rear buttons comfortably for 5 years now, only providing 2 is a glaring omission. Another common Pro controller characteristic are trigger stops. For racing games, it makes sense to leverage the entire trigger travel distance for more granular control of brakes and throttle. In shooting games, however, the trigger is only used as a binary input to signal the firing of a weapon. There are 3 trigger stop levels on the DualSense Edge. Using anything other than the default full-length travel disables the adaptive triggers. The trigger stops work exactly as intended, and I really have no complaints. The only notable observation I have is that the shortest preset still leaves quite a bit of travel distance. Overall, the DualSense Edge is a worthy adversary to Microsoft's Elite Series 2 and an excellent first attempt by Sony. It has some innovative new features and finally provides PlayStation users with a first-party pro-level interface. There are some questionable design choices that could have easily been avoided, but those are minor annoyances. The only real negative feedback I have is in regards to the battery life. We already knew the battery life was going to be an issue when Sony failed to provide any exact numbers and instead said the battery would be moderately shorter than the standard DualSense. Since the 12 to 15 hour battery life of the standard DualSense is already the worst in the industry, that was some concerning news. Well, now we know exactly what Sony meant by moderately. In my testing, I failed to get the controller to last more than 6 hours, with full haptics and adaptive triggers enabled. This isn't because the new controller is so much more advanced than the standard DualSense, which is what they'd like you to believe. They cut the battery from 1560 mAh down to just over 1000. In their defense, looking at how much internal space these replaceable stick modules take up, I'd say this is likely a size constraint than some shady cost-saving metric. Regardless of the rationale though, it's unacceptable performance from a $200 product. So what do you do if you want pro features on a PS5 controller for less than $200 and maintain acceptable battery life? I mentioned Scuff, and their products have already been reviewed at length by this channel and others, but I wanted to showcase a lesser known product by B.Loader. Their B.Savior is similar to the Armor X Pro I mentioned previously for Xbox, but is designed specifically to attach to a PS5 DualSense controller. It's available directly from B.Loader pre-installed on a standard DualSense controller for $150. A DIY kit is also available for $60, but does require the controller to be partially disassembled and some soldering know-how is needed. I was sent the version that came pre-installed on a new black DualSense controller. It also comes with a carrying case, which is strikingly similar to the Xbox Elite case, a USB-C cable, and a USB-C to USB-A adapter. Out of the box, it works natively on PS5, but a $20 USB dongle adds compatibility for PC and Nintendo Switch. It also has a really neat feature that allows a mouse and keyboard to be plugged into it, so USB PC peripherals can be used on the PS5. Plugging in an Xbox controller also works. It even has Bluetooth, so other controllers can connect to it wirelessly and control the PS5 as if they were connected directly. The connection is stable and it maps all of the Xbox inputs to the appropriate PlayStation alternatives, even recognizing the Xbox button as the PlayStation button. The B.Savior has 4 rear inputs and much of the same functionality of the Armor X Pro. However, instead of using an accompanying mobile app, the settings can be configured directly on the gamepad using an integrated screen. At first this seemed cumbersome, but I was surprised how intuitive it really was. Press the button to the left to wake up the screen, and use the controller's directional arrows to navigate the menus. Let's take a look at the available options. First, there's mapping. The initial inputs available to map are the rear paddles or P buttons, but as you can see, there's nothing stopping you from remapping any of the other inputs on the controller as well. Turbo allows the user to select a button and a number of actuations per second to register, up to 25, while the selected input is held. For example, if I map P4 to the square button and enable turbo, when I hold P4, the controller will register 25 presses of the square button per second until released. The square button on the face of the controller continues to operate normally. Auto turbo applies the same logic, but instead of needing to be held, the turbo behavior starts when an input is pressed and continues until it is pressed again. Combination sets an input to be used as a trigger and can register up to 4 other inputs simultaneously. Learning is essentially a way to set macros. First, an input to activate the macro needs to be selected, then a sequence of inputs and timings are recorded, and finally the macro can be told to run once or continuously until the trigger input is actuated again. Multi-sets is basically profiles, where up to 4 configurations for mappings, turbo settings, and macros can be stored. This is useful for quickly applying pre-configured settings across different games. And finally, if you accidentally mess everything up, it's easy to factory reset the device. In closing, there's no shortage of first and third-party options available for players who want to get more out of their peripherals. Xbox has several years of experience in this space, and it definitely shows with the Elite Series 2. Great battery life, thoughtful design choices, and an attractive starting price make it a logical choice for Xbox and PC users. Unfortunately, its compatibility with other ecosystems is limited. Options like the Armor X Pro expand compatibility, add much of the same functionality, introduce new features, and does it all for just $70 or less, assuming you can provide your own Xbox controller. Sadly, it works with just about everything except PS5 exclusive games. The DualSense Edge is an impressive piece of hardware that deserves attention, but limited rear buttons, questionable longevity, and a paltry battery life prevent it from being as good as it should be given the asking price. For PlayStation fans, options like the B.Savior or Scuff Reflex are still perfectly viable. For the right person, Sony's pro-grade peripheral could be a great fit, but for most people, it's not quite enough to give it an edge over the competition. Affiliate links to buy any products I mentioned in this video, links to enter my giveaway for this Armor X Pro, and links to pick up these shirts from Retro Rifle can be found in the description. If you liked this video, you'd probably like my Xbox Series X versus PlayStation 5 video, where I compared the consoles and their respective controllers at length. Get subscribed so you know when my newest video is ready to drop, and be alerted when I go live because I started live streaming again, and I would love to see you there. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.